All right, we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. I'm Jeremy Moss, President Pro Tem of the Michigan Senate and State Senator for District 7. I want to welcome our dynamic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson joining us here with our legislative colleagues. And I want to acknowledge my appreciation to Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks for appointing me as chair of the Senate Elections and Ethics Committee. And I will serve alongside Representative Penelope Cerniglo, who will chair the Elections Committee in the House. Michigan has had, as everybody in this room knows, some of the most highly scrutinized elections in the country over these last several cycles. But no matter how you measure it, how you measure the metrics, our system has proven to be secure and our election results accurate. Our democracy works. This is due in part to the Michigan voters, who have shown up in record numbers to make their voices heard and to ensure that their state government is an adequate reflection of their will. Michiganders have spoken. They want to reduce barriers to the ballot box. They want to increase access to voting. The voting rights proposals that we've seen over the last several years have passed with strong and significant support. Proposal 3 in 2018 with 67%, and Proposal 2 in 2022 with 60%. You don't get to these numbers with Democrats alone. That is Democrats, Republicans, and independent voters coming together to strengthen our voting system so that everyone who wants to lawfully participate in our democracy has the ability to do so. And this session, we intend to build on those successes in our electoral system that have been administered under our Secretary of State and the dedicated election officials across the state of Michigan. Our Secretary of State today will lay out her legislative agenda that promotes free, fair, and secure elections. Much of it we have been pushing for the last several sessions, and now a pro-democracy majority will work to get done. You know that Jocelyn Benson is a nationally recognized champion protecting the freedom to vote and a recent recipient of the prestigious Presidential Citizens Medal. We've worked hand in hand on election policy, especially on legislation. I've drafted and introduced with colleagues in previous terms to ban deceptive petition practices and on many other bills. And I'm looking forward to ushering through a pro-voter agenda in the Senate Elections Committee. I will now turn it over to our Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson.
Thank you, Senator Moss, and to all the lawmakers here today who are working to build on the success and strength of our election system here at Michigan at this critical moment in the history of our democracy. And as Michigan's Chief Election Officer, my responsibility is to ensure that our elections are accessible, safe, secure, and that the results are an accurate reflection of the will of the people. It's a role that increasingly forces all of us in this work, whether we consider ourselves Republicans, Democrats, or independents, to endure threats, harassment, false and malicious attacks on our character and integrity, and sometimes even violence. We cannot have a secure democracy if we do not protect the security of the people who administer, protect, and stand guard over our elections. So we are here today to announce plans to protect the people who protect democracy, the thousands of clerks and election workers who carry out Michigan's elections, and the millions of voters who participate in them. Election officials play a critical role in American democracy. They sign up to work elections because they care about our communities and our democracy. They are professionals deeply committed to and passionate about their work to administer elections. In towns and cities and counties all across our state, they carry out the free and fair elections that enable American citizens to choose their leaders and ensure their voices are heard. We put voters first. We study data, and we implement best practices in our work every day. And every election official is firmly committed to maintaining citizens' rightly placed faith in our elections and ensuring peaceful transitions of power in our country. So ensuring their security is critical to ensuring election security. For the last several years, election officials in our state have been faced with an unprecedented wave of continuous, unrelenting harassment and threats. Enduring these threats creates a near constant strain of anxiety and stress on their work. They are also here, and we are here today, to recognize that these threats are a direct extension of the lies and false information that many intentionally and knowingly spread about the security and accuracy of our elections and voters' ability and right to participate in our democracy. We saw these deceptive practices play out not just in the 2022 and in 2020 election cycles, but to varying degrees in multiple election cycles over the last decade. This status quo is unsustainable and unacceptable. And so today, we're here to announce that we will work to pass legislation that explicitly prohibits and increases the penalties for threatening, harassing, or doxing any election official or worker in any way or pressuring them to break the law. In addition, we are going to introduce legislation that will hold accountable those who intentionally mislead voters about their rights, the petitions they may be signing, and the security of their vote. Finally, as the costs of election administration escalate, our clerks too often do not have the needed resources to do their jobs and ensure citizens have ample access to the ballot box. So we will seek funds to provide the township, city, and county election clerks across our state with sufficient resources to ensure the security of every election and the security of every person who participates in it. We also have newly enacted amendments to our state constitution that my office, along with election officials throughout our state, will be working to implement in the months ahead. To guide those efforts and to guide and inform the work of lawmakers and the work that they will be doing to support the implementation of these new changes, my office has formed an election policy advisory task force comprised of nonpartisan organizations, election officials from both sides of the aisle, and the chairs of the House and Senate election committees, along with representatives from Governor Whitmer's office. This task force will ensure we are working together and allowing data, best practices, and the input of critical stakeholders throughout our state to guide the implementation of these important amendments. The group's charge will also include suggesting, reviewing, and providing insight and feedback on other election-related legislation to ensure we're doing everything we can in this moment to build on the success of our election system and protect every election worker and voter in this state. The work of the policy group and all the legislators here today is critical to the health and the endurance of our democracy. Finally, I'm here today with great confidence in the leadership of my colleagues in the state legislature to ensure we will be working together to build a stronger, healthier democracy that ensures every voice is heard and every vote is counted. So thank you all again for joining me today and everyone here. And I'd now like to invite Senator Sylvia Santana to share a few words. Thank you.
Secretary Benson and colleagues, as a senator of Detroit, I have spoken to the clerks from my district, and I know that they train, educate citizen volunteers that run our elections. The goal of these dedicated clerks in my constituents is to run fair and free elections. At the end of the day, we need to do everything in our power to continue to protect not only the elections, but the people that are instrumental in running our elections. Detroit has directly been targeted for misinformation on elections, and my constituents and my clerks have been threatened and targeted as well. No one should ever be afraid to do their job, especially a job that is important as running our elections. Free and fair elections are instrumental to the success and our democracy. I know that the clerks in Michigan take seriously their jobs, and the election workers are responsible for the success of elections, are highly trained, and understand the importance of their role in democracy. I truly appreciate all they do, and I look forward to working with our colleagues here and the Secretary to ensure that everything we do, we can assure that these protections of democracy institutions are able to do their jobs and for their jobs free of intimidation as well as threats. Thank you. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague.
Next, we have more colleagues that want to probably join in on our pro-democracy agenda here, so come on in, and we will now turn it over to someone I'm incredibly excited to partner with over in the House, the new chair of the House Elections Committee, Representative Penelope Tsernoglu.
Thank you, Senator Moss, Senator Santana, my colleagues in the House and Senate, and of course, Secretary Benson for inviting me to join you today. Last week, I was named chair of the House Elections Committee. As a freshman representative, I am truly honored to have been selected to serve our great state in this capacity. It is a role and duty that I take on with the utmost seriousness. Throughout my career, I have worked hard to expand voting access. Many, many years ago, I spent many a Friday night, Saturday night, and every other night of the week registering students to vote at the MSU dorms and educating them on the election process. As chair of the Elections Committee, I am committed to working with Secretary Benson and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to ensure every Michigander is empowered to share their voice at the ballot box. Our election workers can do their jobs without fear of threat, harassment, or intimidation, and that our clerks have the necessary resources to run secure, efficient, and transparent elections. This past November, Michigan voters spoke loud and clear by passing Proposal 2, enshrining into law our fundamental voting rights. Following this directive, we will pursue policies and introduce legislation to educate voters about the election process and protect and strengthen our voting rights for seniors, rural Michiganders, military and overseas voters, students, workers, and all Michigan citizens who choose to participate in our elections. I applaud Secretary Benson's creation of the Bipartisan Election Policy Work Group, and I look forward to working together to make Michigan a model of the best-run elections in the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I now want to invite another one of our House colleagues who has had a wealth of experience and knowledge in this space, Representative Kara Hope.
Thank you, Secretary Benson and the respective chairs of the House and Senate committees, and my colleagues. My name's Kara Hope. I'm state rep for the 74th House District, which is Lansing and Delhi Township. One thing I think has been iterated and reiterated here today is that free and fair elections can't happen without the workers and officials who run them. And democracy obviously doesn't happen without elections. As we've heard, clerks and election workers have been the subject of threats. And I can tell you anecdotally, as someone who is married to a township clerk, this has affected his ability to retain election workers. The hostile environment, the threats, and that's a shame because when those experienced election workers leave the job, a lot of institutional knowledge goes with them, and that's to all of our detriment. Last term, I introduced House Bill 5282, which would make it a misdemeanor to intimidate an election official, including a poll worker, or to prevent an election worker from performing their duties. This bill obviously didn't make it through last time, but I'm looking forward to reintroducing it soon. And with Secretary Benson's leadership, we're all leading the way on elections issues. It's important to continue to lead the way to fight and protect election workers and election officials. We owe it to these guardians of democracy to ensure that they can do their work free of intimidation, free of threats, and worse. And I look forward to working with my colleagues this term. Thank you.
We'll also hear from our state representative from Saginaw, Representative Amos O'Neill.
Thank you, sir. Madam Secretary, to my distinguished Senate and House colleagues, I'm Amos O'Neill. I'm the representative of Michigan 94th District. I'm here also to advocate for election legislation that helps defend all Michiganders' right to vote. Voting is one of Americans' most sacred rights, and to my Michiganders, your vote is your voice. Election legislation which enhances citizens' guaranteed right to vote to exercise their franchise and to also ensure the safety of the election at the national, state, and local level. This legislation will also impact people of not only Saginaw, but the entire state of Michigan by protecting their voice and safeguarding all rights of Michiganders. We will also help democracy continue to flourish. And I reiterate again, Michiganders, your vote is your voice. It will strengthen the rights of all those who volunteer in the elections. Also, Americans deserve to feel free and secure in the election process. And this legislation does just that by guaranteeing and protecting all those through the law. Not only will my district in Saginaw benefit, but the entire state of Michigan. And I close by saying, your vote is your voice. Thank you.
So as you can see, we have a number of senators and representatives behind me who are working toward this pro-voter, pro-democracy agenda, much of which has been outlined directly from the voter, who spoke loudly over the last several cycles that they want to reduce barriers to voting and promote access to the ballot box. So I want to thank my colleagues for joining us. I certainly want to thank our illustrious Secretary of State, who has been in the trenches on this work, nationally recognized for what we are doing here in the state of Michigan, and want to close out this press conference and invite any members of the media to ask any questions of us.
Yeah, I'm going to put on my former election law and constitutional law professor hat for a minute and combine that with my current job to say what we know is that in the law there are protections for fundamental rights in both our state and federal laws. And much like we have consumer protections to ensure that people can't be lied to about the things that they eat and they drink, we can also intentionally can't be lied to. We can also take some of the same jurisprudence around false advertising and apply it here to the issue of falsely intentionally and knowingly trying to deceive someone about their ability to cast a ballot and vote or sign something when that signature means one thing and they think it means another. So this is not the first or last conversation that folks have had about banning or providing increased penalties for deceptive practices. The issue is intentionality, knowingly, and also we're not talking about candidates lying about their biographies. We're talking about candidates or others lying about how someone can get a ballot and turn it in and make sure their voice is heard. It really captures two different things. Some are direct threats to election officials, and really, moved by falsehoods, a false belief that an election official is doing anything other than their job when they are administering an election. But it also takes the form of harassment, duplicative information requests. Some clerks have received, requests that have been nationally coordinated requests that clerks all around the country have received for buckets of information that, we pride ourselves in our transparency. We pride ourselves in shining that sunlight on our processes. But when the requests for information are duplicative or repetitive or unnecessary, they become a form of harassment that we have to protect our clerks from. And they also, whether they be violent threats or these sort of duplicate document requests that create this harassing atmosphere, whatever form that it takes, we also have to recognize that this is taking the clerks away from their duties and jobs that they're elected to do or appointed to do in their different communities. So we have to work and stand alongside with our clerks and help them bear that burden in this moment, and also seek consequences for those who, for no other reason, oftentimes, than to perpetuate misinformation, are submitting harassing requests or making harassing remarks that harm our ability as professionals to do our jobs in administering democracy.
Secretary, can you define what harassment would be in these bills, and would it include showing up at someone's house and demonstrating at night? Would it include calling a clerk and basically saying if you don't provide access to your voting machine, you might wind up on Fox News tomorrow night. I mean, these are things that happen here. Would those be banned under this proposal?
It's a question of one banning versus consequences for someone who, for example, pressures an election official to turn over materials that they are legally unable to produce. Things like that, which we know have happened, we want to provide both consequences for individuals who pressure election officials to break the law, first and foremost. As someone, I'm not the only election official in this state who has had people show up outside my home. The Detroit City Clerk Janice Winfrey, many others have endured that over the last few years. We recognize the importance of free speech and the importance of ensuring people have an ability to communicate to their election officials and provide that avenue. But also there does cross a line when it creates a hostile environment and a threatening environment, particularly in our homes. So we're going to be looking at all of those things, all of those incidents that have occurred as a result of misinformation over the last few years. And as we prepare for the next round of elections next year, really put protections in place to deter those who would seek to repeat a lot of those past actions. And a lot of what I'm really looking forward to doing through the hearing process and with these lawmakers is bringing those facts more to light, and so that we can together develop policies to see consequences in compliance with all constitutional protections for those who would seek to interfere with our democracy and harass the people who are administering it.
Secretary, I just want to kind of clarify, is this only during the electoral process, or we've seen like threats after the fact, after results have come in?
Yeah.
Maybe not trying to get anyone to break the law, but some sort of threat coming later.
Well, yeah, election officials never take a day off, as anyone who has worked elections these last few years could tell you, including myself and others in our office. So we're always working to prepare for the next election, or as our office just did last week, do post-election audits over the most recent elections. So that work is ongoing, and as is our responsibility to every voter. And so our laws and protections should reflect that as well.
Secretary, going back to the misinformation question, can you elaborate a little bit more about the effort to stop petitioners from lying about the content of petitions, for example, given that and the free speech issue has come up, especially this past election?
Yeah, and I thank my colleague, Senator Moss, who may want to speak to that as well, who's been a champion for this issue, because, in 2006, we saw an initiative proposed to voters, and there was well-documented evidence of fraud in that signature petition process, where people were told a petition meant one thing when exactly in reality it meant the opposite. So I have deep concerns about a system in which voters are being lied to about what their signature on a document would mean and entail. And we recognize that this is it's important to bring all stakeholders together and look at the laws to protect free speech and protect the ability of individuals to petition their government. But people should be also required to tell the truth when they're doing it, and not intentionally mislead a voter into how they're casting their vote or signing a petition. So fortunately, there's already been a lot of research and work done on that, and I'll turn it over to Senator Moss, who's done a lot of that research in proposing this legislation in the past.
Yeah, I think it's now been 2 or 3 several sessions in a row that we've introduced this legislation, because as the petition process starts, we hear the stories of people who have been lied to in order to garner their signature. And so we saw an example of this just this past election cycle, where it was referred to the Attorney General's office, because these were people who were knowingly misinforming their petition gatherers and telling them actually to break the law in order to gain petition signatures. The end of that investigation didn't bring forward any consequences because we don't have it here in law. And so we actually look toward other states that were providing best practices to reduce that type of activity. It's not just curbing speech, and that's kind of not our goal here, but including practices like banning paid per signature, including holding the ballot committee accountable for their training practices and how they train the people who are going out and gathering petitions. So other states have tested this, implemented this, and Michigan is behind on many of those measures. And so we want to catch up to other states that have put ethics and responsibility first in the democratic petition gathering process.
Senator, which states?
We'll actually look to Oregon. Oregon has a series of bills implemented into law that governs over the petition process. And so we're behind on that in Michigan, and then that creates that gap where bad actors can enter into. And we saw people who were trained, I think it was the petition to dismantle the health orders, where they were trained to break the law, trespass on property, in order to gain petition signatures. That was referred to the Secretary of State and Attorney General for investigation, but there were no outcomes from it because we don't have those consequences in law.
I have a question on the harassment legislation. What does enforcement of that look like, and do you envision additional resources needing to be allocated to track down some of these folks?
Yes, oftentimes social media and other vehicles make it possible to identify whoever's behind harassment, or simply just sometimes people just put on Facebook Live when they're outside someone's home, so we could easily see who's involved. So we recognize that, but certainly resources are needed to ensure that we are able to fully actualize not just the protection of election officials, but all the different policies that we're talking about today. And that's something we're recognizing and talking together about as we make sure that everything is fully resourced. But from an enforcement standpoint, certainly local law enforcement and the Attorney General's office, as well as local prosecutors, would all be, I mean, we're talking about, both civil violations and potentially criminal violations. And so there would be, primarily that mechanism of enforcement as opposed to any type of private cause of action or anything like that.
I guess, and excuse me, because there's a lot of new faces in the legislature, I don't know everyone. But I don't think there's any Republicans here. What has been kind of the support from the other side, since election security has been a big point of contention for both sides?
Well, I'll lead off that when we introduced our bills to reduce deceptive petition practices, and when I was a state house member, it passed nearly unanimously. Unfortunately, since 2020, it didn't even get a committee hearing. So in a depoliticized time, these were popular, bipartisan supported pieces of legislation. We welcome Republicans back to the fold to protect the Michigan voter. And in many regards, we've had committee hearings that have amplified these problems. So we're looking for a reset here with a Democratic majority to make sure that we are moving toward a more perfect union with these bills. And we welcome our Republican colleagues to join us again, because they were with us when I was a state house member and we introduced these bills. And then suddenly, in this post-2020 era, they didn't have the willpower to join us. We want them at the table. These ideas deserve bipartisan support, and we welcome them to join us.
And I'll just add to that, good election policy is bipartisan, it's data-driven, and it's holistic in ensuring that whether a voter is a Republican, Independent, or Democrat, whether an election official or the community they represent is rooted in Republican, Democratic, or Independent communities, all of it is the same. We want just to ensure that every voice is heard and that every voter is protected, and that every election official can go to work without fearing that they will be harassed on the job, or that they can return back to their car afterwards without having to worry that someone's going to be waiting for them. So this is policies that just make our democracy work better. And I have found one-on-one many lawmakers from both sides of the aisle eager to support these policies. My hope is that when we all get in the same room, that support is maintained. And it certainly would be my fervent hope that everyone who is a lawmaker in the state recognizes that we are all have a responsibility, a shared responsibility, to do this work together and to protect every voice and every voter in this state.
Just some questions about the process. How many bills are in this package? What's the timetable for introduction? When do you hope to get this to the governor's desk?
Yeah, this is a vision-setting agenda. And so for the first time, we're actually going to, in a while, we're actually going to have hearings and discussion on what policy looks like. But this is setting the tone, this is setting the vision, and this is setting our legislative goals. So that will inform the policies that we're going to forthcome with bill introductions.
So hearings before bills?
No, Rick. No, but we are going to have a robust discussion with the Secretary of State in our respective committees for the first time in a long time about actual things that we can produce out of an election committee besides conspiracy theories.
So to be clear, bills haven't been written yet.
Yep. We are going to close this, and we probably will be available for one-on-ones, but we appreciate the time that everybody gave to us. Thanks.